Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're doing something really exciting. We're going to undergo a complete, and I mean complete, paradigm shift in how we read ancient texts. If you spent any time at all studying Biblical Greek, you know exactly how easy it is to get totally bogged down in parsing individual words, right? But today, we're zooming out. We're shifting from parsing that Greek text brick by brick to seeing the entire interconnected network of meaning using Michael Hoey's discourse analysis. We're going to apply this specifically to the Gospel of John and 1 John to reveal the absolutely incredible structural loom the apostle used to weave his theology. It's going to be great.
Here's our 6-part roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The brick-by-brick fallacy. 2. The clause-relation concept. 3. Revealing the hidden dialogue. 4. Decoding cycles in 1 John. 5. Problem-solution macro patterns. And finally, 6. The exegetical payoff. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The brick-by-brick fallacy. Shifting the analytical paradigm. Now, before we actually learn this new method, we really need to understand exactly where our traditional reading methods are fundamentally falling short.
Think about the old status quo for a second. Traditional grammar basically treats the isolated clause or sentence as the primary unit. The whole goal is accurate micro-translation, right? Just parsing verbs and nouns like they're isolated building blocks. But Michael Hoey's discourse analysis, it completely flips that. It treats the complete text as the primary unit. The focus shifts entirely to cognitive and semantic relations, the actual flow of thought. The exegetical goal here isn't just a word-for-word translation, it's mapping the author's true macro intent. We're literally trading tiny building blocks for a massive interconnected web.
Okay, let's dive into this. Traditional grammar kind of implies that sentence B rests entirely on sentence A, almost exactly like a brick resting on the one immediately below it in a wall. But Hoey's analysis proves that text is actually a nonlinear network. It's so much more dynamic. Sentences project meaning forward and backward across vast conceptual distances. Node 1 isn't just connected to Node 2 next door. It's firing signals all the way across to Node 4. It's a living web.
Which brings us to Section 2, the clause-relation concept. The core unit of meaning. So, if we aren't using isolated bricks anymore, what exactly is our fundamental building block?
Well, Hoey, building on the brilliant work of linguist Eugene Winter, defines the clause relation beautifully. He says it is the cognitive process whereby we interpret the meaning of a sentence or group of sentences in the light of its adjoining sentences. The central, absolutely crucial insight here is that when two pieces of language are placed together, their meaning together is literally greater than the sum total of their separate parts. They create this spark, this relationship, that you completely miss if you just look at them in isolation.
Let's look at a concrete Greek application to see how this works. Take the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 4. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. Traditionally, we just see that grammatical kai, the Greek word for and, as a simple additive conjunction, like item A plus item B. But through the lens of discourse analysis, that kai functions as an expansive relational link. Life is being retrospectively defined by its relational output, which is light. That little conjunction actually forces our brain to execute a cognitive process that merges these two profound theological realities together.
So the really crucial point here is that these clause relations don't just happen at random. Hoey argues they divide into two main axes, logical sequence and matching. Logical sequence deals with time or cause. You diagnose it by asking questions like what happened next or what caused this. For example, take John 3:16. Cause, God loved the world. Consequence, he gave his only son, right? On the other axis, we have matching, which is based on identicality or contrast. There you ask, compare X with Y. Look at John 15:15. I do not call you servants versus I have called you friends. That's a contrast. Honestly, knowing these two axes is like having the ultimate decoder ring for ancient texts.
All right, Section 3, Revealing the Hidden Dialogue, Unlocking Implicit Flow. This is where Hoey's theory gets truly fascinating.
Hoey posits that a written monologue, like an epistle or a gospel, is actually a hidden dialogue with the reader. It's not a one-way street. As an author writes, they intuitively anticipate the reader's invisible questions, and they formulate the very next sentence as the precise answer to that unspoken question. So to properly map a discourse, our job as exegetes is to play detective and discover the unspoken question that connects those textual nodes we talked about earlier. So, what does this all mean in practice? Let's test this out. Is the author of the Gospel of John just listing random divine attributes in his famous prologue? Because, let's be honest, traditional readings sometimes make it feel exactly like that,
like a loose collection of majestic but totally scattered thoughts.
Well, looking at the hidden dialogue brilliantly illustrates why that random list idea is totally wrong. Think about it. In the beginning was the Word. The reader naturally wonders, wait, who was the Word with? John anticipates this perfectly, and the Word was with God. The reader then thinks, okay, but what was his nature? John answers, and the Word was God. By mapping these implicit questions, you get this massive aha moment. It proves John's prologue isn't a loose collection at all. It is a tightly woven, progressively answered logical sequence. It's absolute genius.
Moving on to Section 4, decoding as cycles in 1 John, repetition as scaffolding. Let's apply this to an even tougher text. The Apostle John has a famously repetitive, almost cyclical writing style in his epistles, and frankly, that can really frustrate modern, linear readers like us.
To solve this mystery, we turn to Hoey's concept of constants and variables. He explains that systematic partial repetition actually provides a clause constant. Think of it as a structural frame. The new information that gets inserted into that frame is the variable, or the replacement. So John isn't just rambling when he repeats himself. He is purposefully building structural scaffolding.
It actually helps to look at this almost like a mathematical formula. You take your constant frame, which is the repeated old context, and you add a new variable. This equation literally forces the reader to integrate the two parts into a precise matching relation. The repetition itself acts like a giant neon sign telling the reader exactly what is being compared or contrasted.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly this formula unlocks the Greek text of 1 John chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. The constant frame is if we say, or but if. That's the repeated condition. The first variables are walking in darkness versus walking in the light. Then the resulting variables are we lie versus we have fellowship. See that? Hoey's framework reveals a perfectly symmetrical, structurally precise matching contrast between walking in darkness and walking in the light. John uses those structural constants to highlight extreme theological variables. It is breathtakingly organized when you finally see it.
All right, Section 5, Problem Solution Macro Patterns. Zooming out. We've looked at microclauses and short cycles, but now let's scale way up to see the macro patterns that govern entire chapters.
Hoey identifies several culturally approved patterns that essentially guide reader macro expectations. And the most prominent of these is the problem-solution cycle. It's something we intuitively use all the time. It follows 5 totally predictable steps. We start with a situation, then a problem arises, a response is initiated, a result occurs, and finally an evaluation is made. When a reader encounters a problem in the text, their brain automatically, almost subconsciously, starts looking for the response and the result.
Let's move over to John chapter 9 and see how this builds a massive narrative in the story of the man born blind. It maps onto this macro pattern flawlessly. The situation? A man blind from birth. The problem? The disciples ask, who sinned? The response? Jesus makes mud and commands him to wash. The result? He comes back seeing. And finally, the evaluation, that lengthy interrogation by the Pharisees and Jesus' final verdict on spiritual blindness. The takeaway here is profound. The entire chapter is essentially a single, structurally unified clause relation writ large.
Finally, Section 6, the exegetical payoff, why this matters. Okay, so why does this paradigm shift actually matter to you, the focused learner, the student, or the translator?
The benefits are absolutely immense. First, precision translation. You finally move beyond those clunky word-for-word glosses because you actually understand the relational weight of the Greek clauses. Second, tracing flow of thought. You can confidently map the true narrative and theological arcs without getting lost in the weeds. And third, structural preaching and teaching. You can design lessons that directly mirror the original cognitive impact of the text. It's a total game changer.
Ultimately, discourse analysis equips the exegete to finally break free from that brick-by-brick fallacy we started with. Whether you're holding a magnifying glass for translation, a compass for tracing the thought flow, or standing behind a lectern to teach, Hoey's tools allow you to map the hidden dialogue of the original author. You stop seeing a wall of random, disconnected bricks, and you start seeing the beautiful, interconnected exegetical loom.
So I leave you with this final thought to ponder today. When you sit down with the Greek text, are you still reading it brick by brick, dragging yourself through isolated sentences, or are you ready to step back, look for the hidden dialogue, and finally see the network? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring those connections.